so you need help memorizing your lines. You've been cast in a show, or you're doing an audition, or you need to learn a monologue, and you're looking at this chunk of text going, how am I ever going to remember this? I'm here to share some tips and tricks to help you. Hi, I'm Emery. I am a theater director, teacher, choreographer, enthusiast, and my channel is full of advice for actors to help make you the best artists you can be. So, you're nervous about memorization. I'm going to bring you a couple different techniques today that you can try and see what works for you. This is the thing to remember, is that not every brain learns the same, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, but you need to kind of pick and choose, try a bunch of different techniques and styles. There's so many out there for memorization. And use what works for you. Just because it works for someone else doesn't mean it's going to be your perfect fit. And that's okay, as long as the lines get memorized. Whatever works. So the first tip I'm going to talk about is the abbreviation technique. This is where you take a line of text and you write down the first letter of each of the words in a row, including punctuation, capitalizations, exactly how it looks in the script. And then you use that as a trigger point to come back to memorizing the words. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is a line of script from Shrek the Musical. I wrote it down to memorize this line. Once upon a time, there was a little princess named Fiona who lived in a kingdom far, far away. So notice the capitalizations on the start of the sentence, the proper noun of where she's from and her name, as well as adding in the proper punctuations. So I haven't looked at that script in years. I directed it years ago. I just pulled it down off the shelf as the first script I could. But because I wrote this out, I'm able to look at those letters and immediately understand what that's supposed to say. So you can do this for any of your lines, for your whole monologue, whatever works for you. Write it down as a halfway point. I'm not fully memorized off book, but I can take a look at these points and jump from there to do my full dialogue. Once upon a time, there was a princess. Once upon a time, there was a little princess named Fiona who lived in a kingdom far, far away. So give the abbreviations technique a try. The second technique I want to talk about is chunking. That is breaking down a big part of material into smaller, more manageable pieces. I'm not going to go into the whole science behind memory and memorization and things like that, but our brain processes things in short-term memory and then goes to long-term memory. In order to do that, we need to get chunks of information into our short-term memory so it can process, and we do that by chunking. Again, I don't know the science or if it's been debunked or whatever, but we're just going to use what I have been previously taught and learned, which is the concept of sevens. That your brain can absorb 7 pieces of information in a go. So we're going to break down, let's say, a monologue. It's a page-long monologue. It's a beast that you've got to memorize. First, break it into 7 chunks that make sense. They don't have to be the same length, just 7 story beats within the monologue that make sense. And then each of those story beats, I want you to chunk down to another smaller story beat, 7 within the 7. So you should have your script broken down into sets of 7, and then try to memorize within those distinct little sets. Work on your first chunk, your number 1 out of 7, and then that's broken into 7. You can go through and memorize those 7, because it's breaking your big chunk into bite-sized pieces that your mind can then really sink into and dig into and keep locked in there more efficiently. So that's tip number 2, chunking. Take your big chunks, break it into smaller chunks, and then break it into smaller chunks. Give our brain bite-sized pieces of lines to memorize. My third tip is to memorize with momentum. And I don't mean any kind of characterization momentum, I mean physical momentum. I do my best memorization when I'm out on walks, when I'm riding my stationary bike, or when I'm on the treadmill. My body has forward momentum in it, and my body is fully engaged in an activity, therefore it's sinking better into my brain. So if you can, take your script for a walk. I do this all the time. You might look a little crazy walking down the street with a binder or a notebook, whatever you need to do, but accept the crazy. Go for a walk with your lines. Put a little forward momentum in your body, and it'll help everything stay engaged and stay locked in there. My last tip is to learn for your learning type. Everybody has a different type of learning. We all did those little tests in school that say you're a kinesthetic learner or you're an auditory learner. Figure out what your style is. I'm a kinesthetic learner, hence why the going for walks works for me. If I'm engaging my body, my brain is more apt to remember things. Maybe you're an oral learner and you need to hear something. So use your phone. Say your lines in a neutral tone, neutral pattern. Don't put characterization on it yet. We're just memorizing. Say your lines into your phone and then listen back to it. Another technique that people love to do is writing it out. If you're having problems getting it in your brain, and again, with the kinesthetic, you can write down your lines and putting it in physically into your body. And if you need to have the energy of another person in your space, find a friend that you can run lines with. Run back and forth with them. Make sure you repay the favor, and when they need lines run, you're there for them as well. And that's something that's really great for a different type of learner. So figure out what your learning style is, figure out which one of these techniques works for you. Maybe it's a combination of all of them. When I've got a big audition to do and I need to learn a big chunk of text, I engage all of these. I'll write it out. I will then just do the abbreviations, and then I will take it for a walk. So I've got like a step process. The other thing I feel like I should mention, and I am not an expert in this in any way, shape, or form because I have no idea, is there are now apps for this. There's tons of apps for this that I've seen in different Facebook groups of people posting. Somebody just asked in a community theater Facebook group that I'm in what line learning apps people use. And the responses were so varied. I had no idea there were so many out there. So I myself am going to check some of them out and report back in another video. But if you are working solo and you need some help and you don't have somebody to read lines with you, try an app. Give it a shot. Maybe it'll help. I'm really excited to check them out. I hope this was helpful. A couple different tips and tricks for memorization. It's one of the most daunting things to people coming into theater or acting for the first time, is the concept that you have to memorize all these lines. These are just a couple tips and tricks to make that a little bit easier and hopefully a less scary process. I would love to hear what your process is. We can help each other out. If you see somebody comment that does a technique you haven't tried before, maybe give it a shot. So in the comments below, I would love to hear what your memorization process is, what tips and tricks work for you. And I'll be back next week with more theater advice and goodness. If this kind of theater content is helpful and you love this kind of thing, please click the like and subscribe buttons. I would really appreciate it, and I would love to have you as part of my community. And I will see you next week for more theater goodness. Bye.